Welcome back to the second segment of the program tonight. The scourge of maternal deaths in Nigeria presents not only a public health crisis, but also raises serious legal and human rights concerns. The Nigerian Constitution guarantees the right to life. Preventable maternal deaths caused by negligence, inadequate healthcare infrastructure, or lack of access to skilled birth attendants may be seen as a violation of this constitutional right. If the state fails to provide life-saving maternal health services, it may be held accountable for breaching this fundamental right, as outlined in Section 33 of the 1999 Constitution. Tonight, Professor Uchenna Emeloye, international human rights lawyer, former senior human rights advisor to the UN, Sierra Leone, joins me live as we focus on combating the scourge of maternal mortality in Nigeria and the laws protecting the rights of mother and child. Good evening to you, Prof. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much. You know, on this program, there's been a lot of attention on reducing maternal mortality and morbidity. And also there's been, several conversations with government officials on what this administration intends to do about the numbers out there. The conversation has been had, importantly because WHO opined that most maternal deaths are preventable, as the healthcare solutions to prevent or manage complications are well known. But sadly, the high number of maternal deaths in some areas of the world reflect inequalities in access to quality health services and highlights the gap between rich and poor. And that's where our conversation lies tonight. Not a lot of persons know that there are key laws and legal frameworks that aim to protect the rights of women and children from maternal deaths, particularly within the Nigerian context, also with some international backing. So I want you to give us a clearer perspective on that, Prof.
We would have situated this within the context of global and international legal framework, but that is not helpful for us. I would want to look at the Constitution of Nigeria. Section 33 relates to rights to life. So basically it means that any woman in the birthing process in Nigeria deserves to live. And the statistics that we have now, it's a lot of Nigerian women and girls die in the process. The Constitution provides that everybody is entitled to right to life, except there's an intentional decision to take the life, which is as a result of the decision of a court or other processes. But if you look at the level of negligence in rural communities where women go through the birthing process without appropriate medical attendant and healthcare facility, then that is tantamount to intentional negligence and also the taking of life of women who are involved in this process. I mean, the statistics is not meant to embarrass the government, but it's just to contextualize this issue and to say that it's a big national issue. For every single day in Nigeria, it is estimated that over 250 women die daily from maternal mortality. And if you look at the definition of maternal mortality, it means women who die in the course of being pregnant and 42 days after delivery or postpartum. So you could see that the scope is wide, but apparently in terms of the casualty level, you see that happening in the first 7 days of delivery, and that's where the casualty is. So you have over 90,000 approximately, or 70,000 if you look at it conservatively, 70,000 women die annually from maternal mortality, and that is very staggering. Just in 2023, Nigeria accounted for 29% of the maternal deaths globally. So it means in effect that if 100 women died giving birth in 2023, 29 women, it came from Nigeria. And that statistics definitely should be a concern to all of us. And like I said, this is not to name and shame the government or institutions. I would give credit to the Ministry of Health, the government of Nigeria for the effort so far in this direction. But despite the effort, it is still statistically correct to say that women are still dying giving birth in Nigeria. And this relates to what you say in geography. It is easier for a woman to survive giving birth in Lagos than to survive giving birth to some parts of the country. It is easier for a woman to survive if the income band is comfortable than a woman whose income band is low. It is easier for a woman to give birth and survive if the family context is empowering than women who are in a very discriminated circumstance. So there are multidimensional issues that account for why women die. But ultimately, the most strategic approach to look at it is that these women are human beings and they deserve human rights and they deserve to live even when they have given birth and contributing to the society population.
All right, Prof. From a human right perspective, how should we interpret maternal mortality in Nigeria as a health crisis or a rights violation or both?
It's a health crisis, obviously, and I'm not trying to discountenance the colleagues, the medical practitioners who look at it from the health emergency perspective. That is right, but I'm saying that that is not sufficient. It's a right imperative, it's a right necessity, it's a human right issue because they deserve the right to live. Secondly, if you look at the core principles of human rights, the first is non-discrimination. Incidentally, pregnancy is even discriminatory on its own because it's only women that get pregnant. So when we talk about maternal mortality in Nigeria, we are talking about that ailment, that sickness, if you use that word, that only women undergo in this country. And I mean, I've said it in several instances that maybe the approach to maternal mortality is lackadaisical because only women get pregnant. I wish men do get pregnant, and I'm sure that approach to it would have changed. Because I mean specifically, if you look at a typical man and a woman, there is no cause of death for men in this country that is as threatening as the cause of death for women. Statistically, the greatest risk any Nigerian woman would go through in this country is to get pregnant. So this is a very huge concern. And if our national government, if our National Assembly is not paying attention that is required, then obviously this is a concern.
All right.
If you look at comparative jurisprudence, you'll see.
So, Prof, let's go back to the Constitution, because I'm sure everyone knows about Section 33, which guarantees the right to life. But what you've said is maternal death caused by negligence or systemic failure may be viewed as violations of this right. There's another section of the Constitution, Section 17, subsection 3, which calls on the state to direct its policy toward ensuring adequate medical and health facilities for all persons for the purpose of clarity and better understanding. Which specific human rights are violated when a woman dies from preventable causes during childbirth?
The core right is the right to life. That's a fundamental right, and that's a classical human right, the right to live, because every other right is predicated on being alive. So you don't enjoy the right to vote if you're not alive. So basically, the key human rights that is important for women who go through the birthing process is being able to go through the process and be alive. The rest is secondary, the rest is subsidiary, and the rest of the rights are enablers that the core rights should be the right to life. I mean, if you look at the section you mentioned, it's aspirational. I mean, we know very well the contest between right to health in Nigeria. People say it's not immediate, it is progressive. And governments are expected to show progressive steps to achieve it. But that argument doesn't relate to Section 33. Section 33 is right to life, and right to life is immediate. Nigerian women should be given the right to live immediately and not progressively by the government of Nigeria.
Right. So you've described maternal mortality as a rights violations. Why do we rarely see cases, such cases brought before Nigerian courts? Is it due to legal gaps or weak access to justice mechanisms?
And this is the reason why this advocacy is necessary is to raise the antenna and sensitivities of all the actors involved. Just a week ago, I put the Human Rights Commission on the spot to say that the Human Rights Commission should initiate public interest litigation to defend the rights of women in this area. The biggest issues on public interest in Nigeria relates to locus, the right to go to court. But I can tell you, the next of kin of a deceased should have a right to complain. Okay. The children of the deceased should have a right to complain. And the Human Rights Commission should test the waters by litigating in the public interest on these issues of maternal mortality. If you look at the other issue, which is accountability, there is no level of accountability for the cause of death and for reason for the death of women in the birthing process. people take it as a will of God, and people die and they will die. So to ensure that maternal mortality is reduced drastically, there should be a level of legal component which relates to accountability. Government should be accountable, health officers should be accountable for avoidable deaths in the birthing process.
All right, because thank you for going there, because I wanted to ask this question, quite relatable. If the right to life or right to health or life is violated by a preventable maternal death, who exactly should be held responsible? Is it a doctor? Is it a hospital or the state? Well, I think you've answered that. So can the right to life under Section 33 of our Constitution be used to hold the government accountable for maternal deaths?
I would say yes. And I mean, there are cases already filed, and most of these cases are lost on technical grounds without the courts pronouncing themselves on the issue. So I look forward to additional cases being brought before the courts, and let's see what the courts will say. I'm sure that the courts, through the judicial activism that is a way of interpreting issues today, would give credence to the fact that a woman that goes through the birthing process should be protected by the government of Nigeria. The woman that submits herself to the delivery of an institution should be protected under the ethics of that institution. And obviously, when we talked about maternal mortality, we're not talking about those unavoidable deaths. We talk about those deaths are preventable. And if a death is preventable, somebody's accountable, either the health officer or the health institution or the government by extension.
Because, Prof, you know, the truth is some argue that Section 33 is too general to apply to maternal mortality. What would you say to those who claim maternal deaths are more of, you know, a policy issue than a constitutional one?
Presently, it's a policy issue, but in some countries, in some jurisdictions, it's a constitutional issue. For instance, in Ghana, Section 27(1) of the Constitution of Ghana makes safe motherhood a constitutional right. If you look at the Constitution of Egypt, it's safe motherhood is a constitutional right. The Constitution of Brazil, safe motherhood is a constitutional right. So we look at also in the legal reform of Nigeria, where women who go through the birthing process should be protected, and safe motherhood should be escalated to the level where it's a constitutional right. I mean, you can find this in several legislations that you can extrapolate to make meaning that women should be safe in the birthing process. But I mean, if you look at the hierarchy of laws, there's no law in Nigeria stronger than the Constitution. And the issues of safe motherhood should be escalated to the level where it becomes a constitutional issue, where health officials and hospitals should be able to know very well that a woman in the birthing process deserves to live. And that consciousness is basically what we are pushing for. And again, without accountability, there's impunity. And the level of impunity in this sector in Nigeria is alarming. I mean, I know you're a woman. I'm sure you must have heard that women who are in the process of the push moment, who are being smacked and beaten because they're not complying with midwives' directives. Those level of brutality is not acceptable. And the fact that most women, if you break it down, why women die in Nigeria, most of them die through hemorrhage, inability to stop bleeding after delivery. And I mean, medically, it has been certified that that can be treated if appropriate attention is taken. I mean, I know people who have an argument that women do not subject themselves to medical treatment, and that's why they die. That argument is valid, but however, that argument is an exception.
How valid is that argument, Prof? Because it's quite debatable.
Valid in the sense that, I mean, there are geographical settings in Nigeria where culture and religion prevent certain practices, including a woman subjecting herself to a male medical doctor, or a woman subjecting herself to a stranger entirely. I mean, these are issues that I want to delve into. But however that argument stands, that argument is an exception to the rule. The rule is most women who die in the birthing process were not in any way negligent. Most women who die in the birthing process rely on their husbands or their brothers to their husband to make decisions on emergency. I mean, we are all Nigerians, and we live in a situation where a man who is in a farm needs to make a judgment call before a wife is taking an emergency call. That practices exist, but generally, without going into those religious nuanced argument, the general argument is the number of Nigerian women that die. It's amazing. It's worrying, and that needs to be addressed.
All right, Prof, quickly, another angle that comes to mind is whether there are, legal implications of budgetary shortfalls or mismanagement in the health sector with regard to maternal and child health. For instance, the 2025 Nigerian Appropriation Bill includes a health budget allocation of 2.48 trillion naira, and that represents about 4.99% of the total proposed budget. This allocation falls short of the Abuja Declaration's recommendation of 15% for the health sector. And the truth is, Minister Ndipate tells me that he requires more funding. But are there legal implications?
The funding argument, it's perennial, where government rely on the lack of resources. You are right when you say that the current budget on health is 4.5, maybe 5%, for argument's sake. The threshold should have been 15%, but it's 5%. I am not even, the issue is not even the 5% in question. The issue is how much of this 5% goes to primary health care, where these women die. Any woman that makes it to the tertiary hospital, which is the teaching hospitals, is privileged. The people that we're canvassing for, the Nigerian women that we're talking about, maternal deaths, are those who die in primary health centers. Today, there are 30,000 primary health centers in Nigeria. 30,000, good numbers. But out of these 30,000, 80% of these numbers are non-functional.
All right, then.
And it takes the budget of one secondary health care, which is a teaching hospital,
all right.
to cover the cost of the entire 30,000.
Thank you, Prof. Sadly, we're out of time. But, as we round off this vital conversation, it's clear that combating maternal mortality in Nigeria goes beyond healthcare. It demands a strong legal framework, enforcement of rights, and accountability at all levels. And, protecting the lives of mothers and their children is not just a moral obligation, but a legal and constitutional duty. And until every Nigerian woman can walk into a hospital without fearing for her life, our work remains unfinished. Thank you so much, Professor Uchenna Emeloye, international human rights lawyer, former senior human rights advisor to the UN, Sierra Leone. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you very much for watching, everyone. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But before we go, let's tell you that the views and reactions of our resource persons are theirs and have no connection with TVC News. Meanwhile, you can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode at 12:30 a.m. Get in touch with us on our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, and X at TVC News NG and at Olajumoke using the hashtag Politics Tonight. We're also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News NG. I am Olajumoke Olatuji. Good night, everyone.